America, bonjour, hi, Canada. I hope all of you are happy out there. There's another snowstorm hitting for northeastern Ohio, so it's all things are normal. I just want to point out, nobody gets upset with a foot of snow in Ohio. That's simply considered, as I said, March. I want to begin with a happy birthday to Aaron. Get going, Aaron. Hope Russ is taking good care of you this morning. One of the great people in our lives, Russ and Aaron. They listen every morning before Aaron goes off to teach the children. There's a story today, by the way. Aaron, you need to hear this. It's about teachers generally. And many of you have said to me, what happened to your voice? It got like Chris Christie, laryngitis over the weekend, and it's sort of coming back. But I'm fine. I feel good. I do not have COVID. I just have a little laryngitis. Now, the story that I wanted Aaron to hear is that American school teachers are quitting by the droves, and they are being immediately hired by private businesses. Finally recognizing that teachers are quitting and companies are hot to hire them, according to the Financial Times. Burned out teachers are leaving the classroom for jobs in the private sector where talent-hungry companies are hiring them, often boosting their pay, to work in sales, software, healthcare, and training, among other fields. Now, I think Erin could actually run anything. And she also makes the best soda bread and indeed the very best maple cake ever. So that would be the bonus. It's sort of like drafting people to come work in the White House so they can play on the White House basketball team. But Erin also has managed an extraordinarily successful classroom for 30 years. So just wanted to give you that heads up. Happy birthday, Aaron. Other news. Pfizer BioNTech vaccine for children under 5 should be available by the end of next month, by the end of February. I do not know. I'm going to find out from my daughter today, who's very pro-vaccine, very pro-booster, and her children have been, all 3 of her children have had COVID. 2 of them are in school, primary grades, very young. And then there's a toddler who has not been vaccinated, but who also had COVID. And I just wonder what she's going. She's very pro-COVID, very pro-vaccine, but she's also dismayed at schools and the lack of common sense, having spent the last year in Great Britain where they kept schools open no matter what. I think she's one of the many millions of people who have lost confidence in this government. In fact, that's the big story on Special Report last night, so I want you to get my takes. Bad polling. So Shannon Bream, sitting in for Brett Baer, goes to the panel, and my first question is, well, here it is, cut number 3.
And to add to those, we'll pull up some ABC Ipsos polling, and it does talk about crime and COVID, but also immigration. And approval for the president, Hugh, is tough there. He's upside down 30 points on immigration. On crime, the same thing. At COVID, it's 50-49 on approve, disapprove. So he's got multiple topics where Americans are feeling rattled.
President Biden is in a deep hole, Shannon, and it's getting deeper, and he won't stop digging. He's flailing around, and he's failing as a president. 2 numbers to remember. In 2010, that was the first election to follow President Obama's election. House Democrats lost 63 seats. In 2018, the first election to follow President Trump's election, the Republicans lost 43 seats. So this is traditionally the worst year of a president, 1 term or 2. And redistricting is underway, and our friends over at the Cook Political Report keep a scorecard. Republicans have netted 2.5 seats despite just the most amazing, almost Salvador Dali maps that came out of New York and Illinois that are the height of partisan gerrymandering, and I salute them. I salute partisan gerrymandering. But Republicans are going to take back the House. So if Joe Biden's going to get out of that hole, he needs a reset. This afternoon, the White House leaked to the Washington Post that Secretary Becerra is just not doing his job very well at HHS. So I think the reshuffle is going to start there and include Zients and Fauci and Walensky. We're going to have some name changes on the doors pretty soon, I think. Now, Ari Fleischer disagrees with me that will help Biden. It may not help Biden, but it can't hurt him. And when you're that desperate, I think Ron Klain, the deputy president, knows they have to do something. How desperate? I got a chance to answer that. Cut number 4.
Hugh, what do you think's going on at the DNC?
I think lots of people want to escape from the DNC and from the White House and from especially Congress, so many retirements. Shannon, in a nutshell, it's desperate on the Democratic side, and that does not upset me at all. They don't have an answer to the crime issue and the COVID breakdown. They don't have an initiative that they are going to get through. They don't even have an idea how to make the Supreme Court nomination that is pending into a story. They're desperate for a story. They would love there to be controversy over whether it's Judge Brown Jackson or Justice Kruger in California or Judge Childs. There isn't going to be any controversy. I think the over-under 65 votes. They don't have an answer. They don't have an initiative. They don't have an exit strategy to stop a red wave that is building, and I don't know how they can come up with one. They're not going to come up with one. One last bite at the apple on the Biden nightmare, cut number 5. That's temperate. That's exactly what I'd like to see the DNC chair pushing out. I'm sure he checked that with Ari's successor at the White House, calling everyone fascists who disagree with him. That is, in fact, a reflection of how far gone the Democratic Party is on messaging. They've lost the ability to communicate with, A, nobody knows who Mr. Harrison is, period, beyond the Beltway. And B, when they do hear about him, they're going to find out he's calling them a fascist. It's not a winning recipe. It was fun last night. It was just all about the woe that has befallen Team Biden. Other news, the FDA has granted the Moderna vaccine full approval. The Novavax company has applied to the FDA for the authorization of its COVID vaccine to bring another one online. This is a shocker. New Broadway shows have struggled after the industry reopened, according to the New York Times. Who wants to... Honestly, you broke a habit. When we locked down America, we learned, and that's why Democrats are going to get punished across the country. So many different industries have been so badly hurt by the management or non-management or fecklessness of Team Biden that in returning to normal, in treating Omicron like Delta, which it wasn't, Austria has ended its lockdown. Wall Street Journal ran a story on excess deaths. That is, statistically, if you look at the age of America and the number of people who died pre-COVID, and then you look at the last 2 years, you can back your way into a number about how many people died because of COVID or the effects of lockdown. So since the start of the pandemic, about 6.8 million Americans have died. That's more than 1 million deaths than would have been expected in that time, according to the Journal. The excess deaths are overwhelmingly attributed to COVID, but I think a lot of them are also attributed to the disease of loneliness manifested in drug overdoses, alcoholism deaths, etc. On the markets, bond markets hint of calm after a disruptive sell-off. Let me do my Birch Gold spot this morning. Market update brought to you by Birch Gold. Head to hughgold.com. That's hughgold.com, or text my name, Hugh, to 989898. If you're going to buy gold, which this morning is at 1807, it popped up 0.62% yesterday. The 10-year Treasury at 1.782%. Bond markets are calm, says the Wall Street Journal, but yesterday was a good day on the markets again. The Dow up 408 points, NASDAQ up 469. My only stock that I pay any attention to is Amazon, which went up $111 yesterday, and probably going to... The rebound from the correction is over, and inflation is taking hold, but the markets have figured out that Powell may be serious, and maybe he will do it the right way. Russia and the United States exchanged verbal blows in the United Nations over Ukraine. Again, the drums of war are sounding, and Team Biden can't really get a strategy together. The Post headline is U.S.-Russia clash sharply at UN over Ukraine. But honestly, there's no audio because our UN ambassador isn't very good at this. Going after the Kremlin mafia is the Wall Street Journal leading editorial, which recommends doing what ought to be done, which is go get the oligarchs. And in the United Kingdom, that is happening. And George W. Bush has sent cash to Lisa Murkowski and Liz Cheney. Politico thinks that's the story. I don't. I still think Lisa Murkowski is going to win handily and Liz Cheney is going to win handily because they're actually mainstream Republicans. And Donald Trump does not drive the politics of Wyoming or Alaska as much as he would say the politics of a deep red state. And deep red, I don't mean Wyoming, which is Liz Cheney's home and her mom and dad's home. And maybe I'm wrong, I just can't see Liz Cheney losing. And in Alaska, Lisa Murkowski, I think, could beat a meteor hitting Alaska. Don't go anywhere. More news on this Tuesday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Just a little bit of breaking news. 6,000 people are being asked to evacuate their homes in the early morning in our friendly neighborhood city of Winston-Salem. A fertilizer plant has blown up and has been having explosions and fires, and firefighters are backing off. You don't really ever want to have a fertilizer fire factory going on, even if David M. Drucker is your guest, who could actually put it in a perspective. Drucker, before I go to Whoopi Goldberg, what do you think about that headline, fertilizer fire at a fertilizer plant?
Well, it's just kind of symbolic of what's been going on the past couple of years, all the way around.
Yeah, get in your car and go. That's what it means to me.
Stuff that is exploding all around us.
Yeah. David, what was Whoopi Goldberg trying to say yesterday? I'll play the short version for you. Cut number...
Okay. The Holocaust isn't about race. No, it's not about race. It's about
a different race.
But it's not about race. It's not about race.
What is it about?
So let's just say Hugh and David are in a country somewhere practicing journalism when the Nazis arrive, and they take a look at you and they take a look at me. Which one of us goes to Auschwitz? You do, right, David?
Oh, I'm gone, Hugh.
Yeah.
I'm gone.
So, you, as a Jew, what do you think?
Well, look, people have all sorts of screwy opinions. I mean, I wasn't offended. I was just kind of dumbfounded. I had actually listened to the clip yesterday against my better judgment. I was like, oh, here we go again. Another clip from The View. What are they going to give me this time? And it's not that I don't like the show, but it's always, when this stuff shows up on Twitter, it's always something weird. And I'm like, oh, boy. She didn't mean any harm. It's just her sometimes people say things that are not true or weird, or just flat out wrong, but they do create this sort of logic that you can buy into, sort of like science fiction when you're watching a movie and you follow the rules. But even the rules she created, it just didn't fit. None of it worked, and you'd think people would know better. But, and she didn't mean any harm. It's just wrong. It's just flat out wrong. There's nothing else to say.
I don't want her canceled. I don't want her thrown off.
No,
I just want people to understand, if you're looking for knowledge, you don't go to The View. Because if you're making that level of an error, it's not an interpretation error, it's a category error. Are you really in a position to discuss?
3,000-year wrong error. It's just wrong.
Yeah. And so, does The View, what do they do today? Do they do a tutorial on the Holocaust?
I don't know. Look, I'm with you. I don't think people need to be canceled or fired because they say one, stupid thing or one mean thing or wrong thing. She did not mean, in my view, I watched this. It doesn't strike me that she means any harm or is a bad person. She just was wrong. So if they want to address it, they can address it. If she wants to continue to be wrong, let her continue to be wrong. I mean, I don't think people need to be punished, ad infinitum for these things. But, since it's a show and they like people to talk about their show, we can talk about it and say, well, that was just flat out wrong. And it'd be nice if they addressed it. But that may be her opinion. I don't see the point of a false apology today where she says, well, actually, I don't believe a word I said yesterday if that's not actually the case. And now, just move on. It's just a show. It's a TV show.
Now let's talk about Professor Ilya Shapiro. Great con law scholar, Cato Institute libertarian. He has an unfortunate tweet that very inartful, very inelegant. He's not a racist, but it sounds like he's a racist. He's apologized, but Georgetown suspended him. So why does Ilya get suspended and Whoopi gets back with an apology? And by the way, Ilya apologized as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it would be two different standards. I saw what he said and how he said it. Again, I don't think he should be fired or suspended. He apologized. I think that as a society over the past several years, we've become far too sensitive and unforgiving when people say things in public that are inartful or just wrong or stupid, especially if they immediately apologize. I think, though, this is a reminder of the danger in particular of social media where you have 280 characters in a tweet. You can mess things up. I think the totality of someone's life and behavior is how these things should be judged. If it's an example of how you've been living your life and this just sheds a light on it, that's one thing. When it's the opposite, I think people should show more grace.
I also think Joe Rogan should not be canceled because he's asked some inartful questions of doctors Malone and McCullough. Then others tell me he's made racist jokes. I have never listened to Joe Rogan. He's been at this since 2009. He's got 190 million downloads a month. But he should be left alone. I mean, Spotify's not going to cancel him. David, your thought?
Well, look, he's a moneymaker, so they probably won't. I mean, look, I think by the same token, I think people should be responsible for what they say, and they should think about what they say. They should apologize when necessary, and if the marketplace and a company and a platform that hosts them is going to take actions because of the marketplace, that's what happens in business in the United States. And
all right, David, I got to get a quick,
be free to do it.
A quick plug-in for In Trump's Shadow. You were at the Nixon Library. You sold a bunch of books. How did Jim Byron do as an interviewer?
He was great, Hugh. I mean, he wasn't you, but Jim was
That's
great.
the important thing to say.
People in person.
He was very good, but he wasn't you, Hugh. Actually, I love Jim Byron. He's the new director of the Nixon Library. He is now doing the interviews there, and he had David Drucker talking about In Trump's Shadow last week. Sellout crowd, as always, at the Nixon Library. The Nixon Seminar is tonight. Don't miss it. Watch it, beginning at 5 p.m. on the West Coast. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
I believe we'll start to see much more being open about indoor situations, be they theaters, be they restaurants, be they schools, be they workplaces. That doesn't mean that it's going to be exactly the way it was 3 or 4 years ago. But I think when it comes to travel, school, workplace, entertainment, we'll start to see a gradual return to normal, even though normal will not be exactly the way it was before all of this.
Saying nothing at great length is Dr. Fauci's specialty. Good morning, America. Morning glory to you. I'm Hugh Hewitt, not on the Beltway, on the West Coast, but I'm joined by Byron York, in, of, and by the Beltway, but the Washington Examiner, Fox News. Good morning, Byron. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. Doing well.
What do you make of Dr. Fauci specifically, but generally the White House yesterday leaked to the Washington Post they want Becerra to go. I've written a column saying they need to fire everybody associated with COVID, and then Tony Fauci comes along with another Oracle of Delphi pronouncement. What do you think?
Well, I couldn't tell exactly what he was saying, and let me just give one personal observation. Over the weekend in Washington, D.C., I was out a bit. Went to a place called Union Market, which is a rapidly developing neighborhood in northeast Washington. Didn't used to be a rapidly developing neighborhood. It is now. It was packed, absolutely packed with people. Eating, drinking, looking at stuff. Sunday, went to a restaurant near the Museum of American Art and National Portrait Gallery. It was packed, and the tables were close together. It was a very popular place, absolutely packed. Went over to the museum, spent about an hour there. Big crowds there. People are out living their lives, and this is in Washington D.C., which had been had a big peak of Omicron and has been plunging for quite a while. I was required to show proof of vaccination and a voter ID to vote, which you aren't to vote, to get into the restaurant, which you aren't if you want to vote. So I had to give proof of vaccination, voter, and picture ID to get in. And then of course you wore masks inside the museum, which I found pretty oppressive. But people are out living their lives now.
And I believe Dr. Fauci, Jeff Zients, Javier Becerra, Rochelle Walensky have no more influence over people's decision-making than I do. In fact, I might have more because I'm actually open to new information and I'm on the air every day. What do you think is their effectiveness level right now at sending any message to the public about anything?
You know, I think people have a general idea of how serious the situation is. The reason people are out living their lives in Washington, D.C., and I'm only mentioning that because that's where I was over the weekend, is because they think the threat is low. I mean, obviously, if they thought they were going to pick up something that would kill them, they wouldn't be out, and Connecticut Avenue would be this long, empty stretch, the way it was. During the worst of the coronavirus.
Before the vaccine arrived. In
2020.
Yep.
So people realize this. They follow this, and that's why I think it's ridiculous to try to censure Joe Rogan, for example, because there's a wide range of discussion. People do make their own decisions. We do have these occasional stories of someone who is, defiantly anti-vaccination, anti-coronavirus vaccination, and they won't get vaccinated, and then they catch it and die. People have made their own decisions here, and what you see in cities now, with lots and lots of life going on, and same in suburbs too. I mean, it's just going on all across America. Is people have made a risk assessment. You make a risk assessment when you get in your car. They've made a risk assessment, and they're going on with their lives.
I agree 100%, and it doesn't matter what Dr. Fauci, Dr. Walensky, Jeff Zients, or Javier Becerra said. However, the reason I think they need to go, and I mean tomorrow, is that it's a public health crisis when there are public health officials to whom nobody listens seriously. So that if a new germ arrives or a new variant arrives, and you really need people to modify their behavior, not with lockdowns, but via different ways, via messaging, you need to get rid of the people who are an immediate turnoff. And I also think if Joe Biden ever wants to get a reset like he proclaims, he's not going to get it with Dr. Fauci showing up like a leprechaun at the end of a Lucky Charms commercial every single time.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I certainly think it is time for Dr. Fauci to go, not only on the basis of his performance lately, but just on the basis that he's 81 years old and has been running this agency for a million years, and it's time to move on. I agree the whole leadership is not very good. Dr. Walensky has been just said all sorts of wacky stuff and been very indecisive as head of the CDC. As far as Becerra is concerned, I mean, there've been some knives out for him for quite a while. He's been extremely quiet. He's just stayed out of this whole thing, and which is just weird.
Oh, he's running for governor. Do you not know why this is? He's running for governor.
He's running for governor. Doesn't want to be out and on any limbs, position limbs.
The whole deal with Javier Becerra is he's running for governor, and he does not want to be identified with anything. He doesn't want to be seen with Joe Biden. He doesn't want to be around Kamala Harris. He wants to be the governor of California. And so people need to understand
a bad choice for his current job.
So. A horrible choice. Yeah, but he can't get fired either, because if you get fired, then you're not going to be governor of California. So they're really stuck. Now let's go back to Joe Biden. I was on Special Report last night, and it's kind of batting practice, right, when the subject is Joe Biden's numbers. And so we were all having the home run derby last night, Ari Fleischer, Mar Eliason, Shannon Bream, and myself. I actually don't think he can recover, and I don't think anyone thinks he can recover. And I don't think anyone thinks the Democrats can win in November. Am I right?
Pretty much correct. As a matter of fact, I saw some really interesting statistics. First of all, Gallup has kept poll numbers since the 40s, and the average midterm loss of a president whose job approval rating is 50 or above is, I think it's about 14, and the average midterm loss of a president whose job approval rating is below 50 is about 37, and since the 40s. There has never been a president who substantially improved his job approval rating between about this time of year in the midterm year and the midterm elections. So it would be unprecedented if Joe Biden somehow got his approval rating up to 50 or above by November. So in other words, you're looking at a president at a party going into midterms with the president of their party well below 50%. Historically, they're in for losses, and we can't say it enough. Their margins on Capitol Hill are incredibly narrow, literally a handful of votes in the House, and no majority at all in the Senate, tied 50-50.
So they're going to get blown out. 63 seats lost in 2010 after Obamacare. 43 lost by Donald Trump. Those are the most recent two first off-year elections of the last two presidents, 63 and 43. 2002 is an outlier because it occurs within a year of 9/11. So we have these two indications that they're going to get crushed. So if you honestly were going to give Joe Biden advice, let's assume Ron Klain is listening as he does most mornings. What's your honest to goodness, sincere advice to try and get out of the hole that he's dug?
Wow. Well, what you would do is you would try to do. Bill Clinton had a terrible first year for different reasons, but a really bad first year. And then he tried to rhetorically move to the middle. And then he only really did that after he lost, I think it was about 50 seats, in his first midterm in 1994, which became known as the Republican Revolution. Republicans take the House for the first time in 40 years. Newt Gingrich becomes Speaker. So that's a big deal. And then he comes out and he says, he does not mean, but he says, the era of big government is over. And he kind of rhetorically tries to reposition himself in the middle after having made the disastrous decision to put his wife in charge of his premier initiative, which was a healthcare reform back in 1993. So he repositions himself in the middle. And so that's probably the only thing that Biden could do. But he does not have the political ability, and he doesn't have the energy. I think if you looked at his statements yesterday before the governors, he looked terribly, terribly tired.
We're going to cover that
next. The energy or the ability.
You're right. They don't have an answer. They don't have an idea. They don't have an excuse. They don't have an exit strategy. They are doomed politically. Thank you, Byron York. Follow him at Twitter at Byron York. Watch him on the Fox News Channel and at Washington Examiner. I'll be right back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to all my 450-plus affiliates. Many of you are new, and you've never heard me explain, and I will in the next segment or so, that I am a product of a wonderful family, but also of Catholic education, 12 years of Catholic education, by the Sisters of Divine Providence, the Sisters of Notre Dame, the Franciscan Third Order Regular, and a bunch of great diocesan priests. And as a result, I have a worldview, and it doesn't move much. And I believe that we are at a moment of renaissance for Catholic education, as does Professor Chad Pecknold. He's a professor of theology and anthropology at the Catholic University of America, frequent contributor in the Public Square, great talker. Good morning, Chad. How are you?
I'm all right. It's a great week for Catholic schools, and I'm happy to be on your show to talk about it.
I did not know it was Catholic Schools Week until you actually used the hashtag in your Twitter feed this morning. So I'm glad that we've got it going. But do you agree with me that the collapse of public education credibility in a lot of America has opened the doors for a renewal of Catholic education?
100%. I mean, we have seen. I mean, it does not yet reflect this because the NCEA data only goes up to September of the pandemic, but what we've had, I mean, you experienced the last time that Catholic schools were in a great renaissance, and that was
We've lost his cell phone. Okay, we just lost what you said there, Chad. When was the last renaissance of the Catholics? We're going to have to call him back, Dwayne. You're going to have to go to the emergency callback line. You know what? When you're talking to people over at Catholic University, I don't think Catholic University has a jamming mechanism to the secular world, but they might. It might actually be that CU is jamming all outbound cell phones. But I do believe that if you're a parent right now and you're sitting out there, he's back, Chad. I hope we have a better connection. So you were saying,
sorry, it's a public school conspiracy against Catholic schools to knock me off your show.
So you were saying about the Renaissance of the '60s. Are we there again?
Yeah. I mean, we had massive success back then, and we've been in decline. But since basically September of the pandemic, we've had a massive resurgence in the Boston diocese, for example, up 6,000 new students. That's the first increase that the Boston Catholic school district has had an increase. They had school closures for 30 straight years. This is the first year they have not had a school closure. Just for your listeners, to think about, 6,000 new students for one district is $90 million in what could be voucher money. If we had vouchers going to Catholic and classical schools, that's the families are making choices because they are starting to wake up that city and county schools are pushing false ideology on their kids.
And they are being controlled. I think this is the great exposure of government bureaucracy. I believe now people understand that the schools aren't about teaching kids anymore. They're about serving union groups and ideologues. But going back to
100%.
Catholic schools, how are they responding to the challenge? Did any diocese step up and reopen a Catholic high school or add teachers or reaffirm their worldview?
Absolutely, and I think what we see across the country, and we see these bumps in Boston, in Arlington, my own diocese here across the river from the Capitol. We had 1,100 new students. So I have 2 children in Catholic schools at the Basilica of St. Mary's School here in Alexandria, and it was amazing to watch. It was amazing.
And that's not your parish, is it?
It is my parish as well. My parish.
How come I've never seen you? You don't go to the 7 a.m. Mass? That's when I go. It's the shortest Mass and no music.
I have seen you there. Hugh, you're so famous that we see you even when you don't see us.
Oh, that's so funny. But it's the white hair is giving it away. But the 7 a.m. Mass at St. Mary's is one of the best Masses I've ever been to. It's just...
Well, I'm happy to hear it. I mean, we have a wonderful parish and we have a wonderful school. And the school, was really, really good on mitigation strategies, and we stayed open the whole time. We actually had one child in a public school, and we pulled them out of the public school. Thank God we pulled them out of the public school because that public school never went back. I mean, it's just starting to go back now. We put them in the Catholic school, and they wore masks the whole time. Now they don't have to wear masks, thank God for Governor Youngkin. But they had in-person learning for the whole pandemic.
Now, Chad, I got a question for you, though. When you moved your child to Catholic school, I have no idea what they cost anymore. When I went to high school in the 70s, it was $300 a year. That was a big gulp. It's not $300 even at John F. Kennedy High School in Warren anymore. What is it? And as Catholic philanthropists stepped up to help scholarship kids into the schools.
We absolutely have. We need more of that. Obviously, it's what we do, what many schools do, not just Catholic schools but classical schools, charter schools do, is a kind of assessment of what a family can afford and allocate the resources that we have. I think on average, a middle class family is probably paying a few $1,000 a year to send their kids to a Catholic school. It depends on the school. So the sticker price is not always the actual price. I think it's affordable insofar as what the student is getting is an actual education that's attentive to eternal truths rather than critical race theory and teaching your kids that there's no genders at all. I think actually what we've seen is that families are choosing, even if they're liberal, even if they're progressive, we're seeing families say, you know what, I can be tolerant between adults, but for my kids, I actually want my kids to know true things.
Well, I agree with you, Chad, but now here's the rub. Are Catholic schools still Catholic? I mean, we don't have Sisters of Divine Providence. We don't have the Sisters of Notre Dame. The Franciscan Third Order regulars are not teaching much anymore. Are Catholic schools still Catholic?
Okay, so here's a great point. I mean, absolutely. Liberal ideology infects everything. It infects churches. It infects families. So Catholic schools aren't immune from this, as you know. What I see was certainly now Arlington, as you know, is a more conservative Catholic, diocese. So I'm a little bit biased, but what I see is an emphasis on catechesis, an emphasis on actually making sure that all the kids know what the Catholic faith teaches about eternal truth. It's not forcing them to believe. If you go into a public school, a city or county school, you're forced to believe in race essentialism. If you go to a Catholic school, you're not forced to believe in God, but you're given the opportunity to learn about the eternal truths that the faith teaches. And I see that many Catholic superintendents, Catholic school superintendents, realize this is their distinctive. That they're offering something different, as you said in your opening, a different worldview, a different way of seeing the world. And I think Catholic principals are realizing that that they actually have this unique opportunity to seize this renaissance, to seize this turnaround. If Boston Diocese is getting 6,000 new students, what are parents choosing? They're choosing to free their kids from the teachers' unions.
I pray you are right. I'm talking with Chad Pecknold, who is the professor at Catholic University. We're talking about Catholic School Week and the fact. Now, the question is, who does the most good here, Chad? Is there an organization that devotes itself exclusively to scholarshiping students into good Catholic schools, or is it all diocese by diocese?
It's diocese by diocese, and so I think, if people want to give money, they should call up their bishop. Bishops and cardinals and archbishops were very important during the pandemic. People don't realize that bishops were, they get a bad rap, but they were on the phone with governors saying, we want to open. When, the teachers' unions wanted to stay closed, Catholic schools wanted to stay open, and they figured out a way, and they got governors to sign on to them being open when city and county schools were closed because of the teacher unions. And so I would say call up your local diocese and say, I'd like to help support Catholic schools, or even just call the principal of your local Catholic school and say, how can I help?
I agree with this, and I really hope that people realize it's an opportunity to change your child's life. There's a good Catholic school near you. If you think the ticket is too high, call them up and talk to them about it. They will work out a plan, Chad, 30 seconds. They will work with you, won't they?
Absolutely. If you can't afford it, we'll find a way to get you in.
Chad Pecknold, thank you, my friend. Professor Pecknold is over at Catholic University, also a St. Mary's school advocate. Good for you. I'll be right back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back, America. I'm playing artists who might pull their music from Spotify, so it's Jackson Browne today. I'm joined by United States Senator Tom Cotton, Republican from Arkansas. Good morning, Senator Cotton. Do you play golf?
Hugh, I used to play golf, but I hung it up in my Army days when I spent all my time out running and training.
All right, I wanted to warn you. My old White House boss, Dick Hauser, is out on the first tee this morning trying to get someone to give him strokes, and I figure you might be nice enough, if Dick Hauser takes you to golf, to give him strokes. Don't do that. So, Senator Cotton, we're talking about education this morning. You and I normally talk about Ukraine. We normally talk about China, armed services, intel, and judges. Let me ask about judges. Do you expect a timely and respectful hearing for whomever President Biden nominates to the Supreme Court?
I do, Hugh. Obviously, we'll give this woman a very careful and thorough review. We will study what is her record. In all likelihood, it seems what will be her judicial record, since the indicators are that this is likely to be a sitting judge. We will carefully review her professional record before her time as a judge. And obviously, there's matters of investment history and other history in one's past. The FBI investigates that. It's routine for every federal judge. Obviously, the stakes and the attention are a little bit higher in the Supreme Court context than it is in lower court context. But this is something the Judiciary Committee does routinely. I can't say that I have high expectations that Joe Biden will nominate someone whose views of the Constitution and the rule of law I can support. But I can say that I, for one, and I doubt any Republican senator, will engage in the kind of obscene smears and personal attacks that are totally baseless that the left launched most famously and originally against Clarence Thomas and then renewed against Brett Kavanaugh.
I got Senator Cotton. Most famous and originally against Judge Bork.
So, Hugh, I think you're starting to show your age, or at least my relative youth.
That's true. I mean, you weren't born then.
So I do. So if I recall, Hugh, though, although what Joe Biden and Ted Kennedy and the rest did to Judge Bork it originated the term borking, which is unfair attacks on a judicial nominee. But if I recall, wasn't the controversy about Judge Bork primarily about his legal views and his writings and his rulings?
Yeah, the key smear was that he would be indifferent to back alley abortions.
Yeah, and that was obviously a lie. But Hugh, to me, that's a horse of a different color of what Clarence Thomas faced. Clarence Thomas is a fine man and an outstanding jurist, and the kind of baseless personal attacks that he faced had been trumped up at the last minute, that had been facilitated by Joe Biden and his Judiciary Committee is beyond the pale.
Fair point. Now, I think the over-under on votes is 65 for the new judicial nominee, because some people, and I expect you will be one of them, will vote against the judicial nominee because they will have an expansive view of judicial power, but it won't be a personal animus. And there are a bunch of us, and I'm on the side of a president gets a nominee unless they've got a Abe Fortas problem. They're corrupt. And so and it ought to be fairly quick if they win the presidency, unless it's the last year. I'm with McConnell. So in terms of expectation, Democrats want to fight. They're not going to get one of the sort that they want to gin up their base. Or am I wrong, Senator Cotton?
Well, if you want to put the vote total at 65 for Joe Biden's nominee, before we even know the name of that nominee, I'll probably take the under on that. And the reason I say that to you is I've reviewed several dozen of Joe Biden's nominees to the lower courts. And almost to a person, these nominees have been left-wing ideologues who view the Constitution not as a constraint on government power, not as the fundamental law to be observed and upheld in our system of government by laws, but by men. Then I'd be very surprised if he breaks with that practice at the Supreme Court.
I think you're going to get a very liberal left-wing judge, and I think it'll be 65 votes because of the reflection of the traditionalist Republican approach to judges, which is absent an Abe Fortas deal, you get it. Now let me ask you. Go ahead, Senator.
I just want to make one point. You made the justice that this nominee is going to be replacing is a good case in point of what you said, though, about having very different judicial philosophies. Outside the occasional antitrust or administrative law decision, there are not many decisions that Justice Breyer joined over the course of his long career at the Supreme Court that I agree with. However, I respect Justice Breyer. You know him. He's been on your show, which speaks very well that he's willing to come on a show like yours to talk about his books and his approach to jurisprudence. There's a big difference between saying, as you often say, Hugh, between saying someone is wrong and saying someone is right.
Yep.
A lot of Republicans may say this nominee is wrong as a jurist and wrong on jurisprudence. Again, that's a horse of a different color from what the Democrats did to say Brett Kavanaugh or Clarence Thomas, which is trying to spin lies to make them appear as if they are rotten.
And there was some of that with Justice Coney Barrett as well. But the Democrats realized that they were about to burn their fingers on Catholicism big time, and they backed away. Let me turn Senator Cotton, because this is not in your wheelhouse, but I'm curious. It is Catholic school weeks. I think across the country, what Arthur Herman calls the Great Confinement has realigned politics primarily around the failure of public schools to do their mission for 2 years. And I'm hoping people put their kids into Catholic schools or Christian schools or private schools. Have you sensed out on the road as you travel for candidates for 2022 that what Arthur Herman said is true, that the Great Confinement has shattered parents' confidence in government, especially government-run schools?
Yeah, very much so, Hugh. Like, once you get outside of a few blue citadels, like, frankly, the Washington, D.C. region is the most COVID-neurotic place in America. And I've been to places like Los Angeles and New York over the last 6 months or so. Washington, D.C. is by far the most COVID-neurotic place in America. But once you get outside of a handful of those blue citadels, most Americans are ready to move back to normal life. I mean, when I'm home on the weekends or for recesses, you take your mask off when you walk outside the airport in Little Rock or Northwest Arkansas, and you don't put it on until you go back into the airport. You go back to Washington for a legislative session. There are no vaccine passports at restaurants. People are not wearing masks when you go into the Walmart or the Kroger. schools are open. The only reason schools have been closed for the last year and a half in Arkansas is you had occasional, as in mid-January, occasional instances in which schools had too many people on staff as teachers or bus drivers who were sick and therefore staying home to have classes open. But otherwise, it's been normal.
And will the government move on? This is coming to the reset question. I have argued that Becerra's got to go, Zients has got to go, Fauci and Walensky got to go, that they do not have any credibility with at least half of the American public. And if you're going to reset COVID policy, especially before another variant or a different public health crisis arrives, you've got to have a clean sweep. Do you see any indication that anybody's going to go from Team Biden?
They should, but this is, I think this is in part, Hugh, a case where the Democratic Party leadership is being led by the Democratic Party membership. You have a few exceptions around the country among Democratic mayors and governors, but for the most part, from Joe Biden on down, just like they capture by the far left when it comes to things like critical race theory or structural racism and all that nonsense. They're also captured by their far left when it comes to neurotic COVID obsession. And Democratic politicians, whenever they start recommending that that things get back to normal, that schools be open, that we don't obsess about vaccine passports and mask mandates anymore, I think they face a lot of criticism from their far left voters. Now,
if Republicans,
that's not a majority.
It's not. It's probably less than 20% of the country and not even 50% of the Democratic Party. But if the Republicans get the House and the Senate back, is there anything they can do with Joe Biden in the White House to fix American education?
I think it's going to be tough with Joe Biden in the White House because another problem you have with American education, Hugh, is the influence of the teachers' union, especially teachers' unions at the national level in big cities. Not really an issue in Arkansas, but in a lot of cities, in a lot of states it is. And that's, again, what did Arthur Herman call it, the Great Confinement?
Yes.
I think in the school context, it's another instance, or another problem you have is with these teachers' unions that have been insisting on these kind of crazy safetyism policies. You had Chicago schools, for instance, refusing to go back into session.
And Detroit.
And Detroit this way. And other places around the country where public school systems are beholden to far-left teachers' union leaders and therefore not serving their students very well. So when we take back the House and the Senate this November, I can assure you that trying to ensure every child has a good education and that every parent has a say in their kid's education, whether that education happens in a public school or charter school or a religious school, I think we're going to face, kind of constant efforts to undermine those principles from the Biden administration and the Biden Department of Education.
Last question, Senator Cotton. If the House and Senate are Republican, that means reconciliation will be open. Is it a reconciliation eligible action to provide for a tax credit for private tuition K through 12?
Probably, Hugh. We obviously have to study the budget rules and the precedents on that. But in general, anything that is a tax is eligible for reconciliation. That's how, for instance, we repealed the hated Obamacare mandate in 2017 using reconciliation because the Supreme Court had held that is a tax penalty for not having health insurance. The issue, I think, is probably not so much whether it's eligible for a reconciliation vote at a mere majority in the Senate. The issue is whether Joe Biden, beholden to the teachers' union, would ever support such a thing.
I can't.
That's a much longer shot.
I cannot imagine a president vetoing a tax credit for private education. I really can't. I know the teachers would want it vetoed, but I hope Republicans do that, Senator, because it would be the delineation of the timid and the union-owned versus those who care about kids. Last word to you.
I think that's right, Hugh, and I think that could be a campaign centerpiece. Just has been a centerpiece for gubernatorial races this year around the country, that Republican candidates are making clear that we have our faith in parents, and we want to make sure that parents can choose the best education for that kid. In many cases and in many places, that's going to be a high-quality public school. But in other places, it's going to be a private school or a religious school. And what we should support parents to the extent we can in making those choices, especially working-class parents who don't have the means to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on K-12 education.
Well said, Senator Tom Cotton. Always a pleasure. I hope you give that speech. I hope you lead that charge. You did lead the charge to repeal the Obamacare tax. So leading the charge to give a private education credit K through 12, good campaign issue, Senator Cotton, if someone's running for president, just saying.